Shalom! I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be reviewing the current situation regarding the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, as well as sharing with you the possibility of a regional war in the near future involving Israel, Syria, and Iran. First, we're going to share with you an overview of what we're going to be covering in this week's report. Recently, the Palestinians were accepted as a member of the United Nations organization UNESCO. And in response to this, Israel decided to penalize the Palestinians by suspending the transfer of tax payments that they make to them as a part of the 1993 Oslo Accords. The Oslo Accords were an agreement that Israel made with the Palestinians regarding talks to eventually create a Palestinian state. Because of German pressure to withhold selling Israel submarines if they did not release these funds to the Palestinians, Israel decided to release the funds and receive the German submarines. The United States told Israel that if they do not want to be isolated in the Middle East, that they need to restart peace talks with the Palestinians. Israel told the United States that it was the Palestinians who are responsible for the stalemate in the peace process because they will not agree to have direct talks with Israel without Israel first suspend building in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. The quartet, consisting of the European Union, the United States, the United Nations, and Russia, will be meeting with Palestinian and Israeli representatives regarding renewing peace talks on December the 13th and 14th. The quartet requested, as a part of an outline of the steps that needs to be taken in order to have an ultimate peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, the quartet outlined the next steps in the peace process in September, and as part of that outline, they requested that both the Palestinians and Israel submit to the quartet their views on how they see the future borders of a Palestinian state and what security arrangements would be needed to secure the peace. The Palestinians have already presented their position on borders and security to the quartet, doing so in November, and said that they were willing to submit to the quartet their position on all final status issues as well. Israel, however, does not want to submit their position on borders and final status issues without it being done in the context of direct peace talks with the Palestinians. The Muslim Brotherhood won recent elections in Egypt, and because the Muslim Brotherhood is hostile toward Israel and the peace process, this is going to complicate the peace process as well as endanger the over 30-year peace agreement between Israel and Egypt. Hamas, who is hostile to making peace with Israel, is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Next, we're going to share with you an overview regarding the possibility of a regional war in the Middle East in the near future involving Israel, Syria, and Iran. There is strong evidence that the United States is behind the uprisings that have taken place as a part of the Arab Spring in Syria against the government of Bashar Assad. The United States and the European Union, along with the Arab League and Turkey, are playing the leading role in organizing the Syrian opposition, who are mainly Sunni Muslims that are led by the Syrian National Council and the Free Syrian Army. The United States is training Syrian rebels in Turkey. The United States told Lebanon that they are willing to help their military secure its border. U.S. Special Forces are leaving Iraq and are being positioned on the Jordanian side of the Jordanian-Syrian border. Syrian and Turkish troops are stationed on the Syrian-Turkish border. In a show of strength, Syria has recently conducted war games. Syria has armed their missiles with chemical warheads. The United States, the European Union, and the Arab League, along with Turkey, are leading the attack against Syria because they would like to break the Shiite Muslim coalition of Syria, Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, who want to work together to influence their ideas and their policies in the Middle East. Iraq warned that if Bashar Assad of Syria is removed from power, that it would cause a regional war and would result in an alliance of Sunni Muslim nations against Shiite Muslim nations. Russia and China view the effort to topple the current government of Syria as opposing their strategic interests in the Middle East. As a result, in order to help Syria against any military attack from any other nation, Russia has delivered ship-killing missiles to Syria. Russian warships are in the Mediterranean in case war breaks out with Syria. Because of the uncertainty surrounding Syria, Israel is also preparing for war. The Israeli news gathering service Debka reports that because of the tensions in the Middle East related to Syria, that a regional war in the Middle East could break out as soon as the middle of December through the middle of January. Next, we're going to share with you the recent developments regarding Iran's nuclear program. A United States-Israel stealth war against Iran's nuclear program has effectively been going on for several years. As a result of being able to infect Iran's nuclear program with various computer viruses, it is believed that an Iranian missile compound was severely damaged about 3 weeks ago. Israel believes that Iran is nearing completion of being able to produce a nuclear bomb within the next 6 months. Israel would like to see the United States engage in a military strike against Iran's nuclear program in the next 2 to 6 months to prevent them from acquiring a nuclear bomb. However, the United States would like to give more time for the recent sanctions imposed against Iran to work and to use the military option as a last resort. As a result, the United States does not want to have a military strike against Iran until the fall of 2012. Israel, meanwhile, is leaving open the possibility that it may engage in a military strike against Iran's nuclear program without the pre-approval of the United States. The United States is strongly condemning Israel for taking this position. In anticipation of war with Iran, the United States has warships in the area. China said that it's willing to start World War III in order to protect Iran. Iran is preparing for war and is conducting war games to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, from which passes 40% of the world's daily supply of crude oil. In another significant development, Iran captured a U.S. drone that went into Iranian airspace. It is believed that Iran was helped by the Russians in order to be able to successfully down the drone. This is a cause of concern in the United States. The drone was a part of the U.S. CIA military reconnaissance plane to gain intelligence on the status of Iran's nuclear program. Russia and China have asked Iran to be able to view the U.S. drone in order to understand how it is technologically made. Iran is willing to make this drone and to understand its technology available to Russia and China, but is asking that Russia and China in return supply Iran with a missile defense system. This is an overview of the past week's news as it relates to Israel in the Middle East. Let's now look at some of the details of these things. Israel's decision to release frozen funds to the Palestinians last week came after Germany insisted it do so as a condition for the completion of a sale of a submarine, a German newspaper reported Sunday. According to the report, aides of German Chancellor Angela Merkel had confidentially informed leaders of opposition parties in the German parliament that Israel made a concession before Germany approved the sale recently. On the same day, the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said $100 million in blocked revenues, such as customs duties, was being released to the Palestinian Authority. The sale of the submarine, the sixth from a German high-tech dockyard to the Israeli Navy, had been held up for over a year. In a speech in the United States, U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta called on Israel to restart peace talks with the Palestinians. He said that the United States remained committed to Israel's security and will not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, over the past year, he said, we've seen Israel's isolation from its traditional security partners in the region grow, and the pursuit of a comprehensive Middle East peace plan has effectively been put on hold, he said. Panetta said Israel should lean forward in its efforts to achieve peace with the Palestinians. Israel responded to Panetta's words by blaming the Palestinians for stalled peace talks. Mark Regev, a spokesman for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, said, "To our regret, the Palestinians are the one who decided to boycott the negotiations. Israel would like to see direct negotiations with no preconditions, and we stand ready to resume them. But the Palestinians must renounce their attitude toward restarting peace talks." The Palestinians reiterated that they will not meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to restart peace talks unless Israel completely halts building homes in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. Mahmoud Abbas has said that the Palestinians have presented the quartet, who consists of the United States, the European Union, the United Nations, and Russia, with their comprehensive views on a final peace agreement with Israel as it relates to borders and security. The Palestinians also said that they are willing to present their position on all final status issues. If the Palestinians are unsuccessful in restarting peace talks with Israel, the Palestinians say that they are determined to proceed with their efforts to seek recognition of a Palestinian state at the United Nations. Meanwhile, the Quartet of Middle East peace negotiators have said that they will be meeting with Israeli and Palestinian representatives in order to restart peace talks on December 13th and 14th. In elections that were held in Egypt recently, the Muslim Brotherhood gained more than 40% of the vote. Their share of the vote was larger than any other party that ran in the recent election. Established in 1928 in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood was the most powerful opposition force to the rulership of recent Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. The Muslim Brotherhood is hostile to the policies of Israel. It has historic links with the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas and shares its belief in an armed conflict against Israel. We will continue to watch the developments in the Middle East to see if the current tense situation with Syria and Iran ends up resulting in a war in the near future. This is going to conclude this week's Focus Israel report. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.